The 12 links of dependent origination, the cycle of samsara, and the path of liberation in Buddhist teachings. The 12 links of dependent origination is one of the most fundamental and important principles in Buddhism. It explains how all existence depends on the complex interaction of various factors and conditions. Each link in this chain is part of the cycle of birth and death, samsara, that all sentient beings undergo until they attain enlightenment. The 12 links illustrate how suffering arises starting from ignorance and ending in death, and how by breaking this chain, one can escape the cycle of samsara and realize nirvana. In this article, we will analyze each factor in detail, drawing from practical examples cited in Buddhist scriptures and clarifying how to apply these teachings in modern life. A notable historical example of profound insight into dependent origination is the story of King Asoka, the ancient Indian emperor. After witnessing the horrific consequences of war, he decided to abandon violence, turn to Buddhism, and learn how to eradicate the causes of suffering. That was when he fully understood the cycle of the 12 links of dependent origination, as the Buddha taught in the Majjhima Nikaya. The 12 links of dependent origination is not merely theoretical, but a real chain of cause and effect that all sentient beings experience. By understanding and practicing this doctrine, we can see clearly the nature of suffering and discover the path to liberation. The meaning of each factor in the 12 links. The 12 links of dependent origination is a causal sequence explaining how suffering arises and re-arises in the cycle of samsara. Each link plays a critical role in forming and maintaining suffering. Below is a detailed analysis of each link. 1. Ignorance. Ignorance is the starting point of the 12 links and the root of all suffering. It is the lack of understanding or the mistaken perception of the true nature of life, failing to see the three fundamental truths: impermanence, non-self, and suffering. This ignorance is not just ordinary lack of knowledge, but rather the absence of the wisdom to recognize that all phenomena in life are neither fixed nor independently existing. Because of being veiled by ignorance, people do not see the true nature of life, clinging to impermanent things such as possessions, fame, power, and even their own bodies. Example: a person might spend their entire life pursuing material values, believing that these will bring eternal happiness. However, they fail to realize that everything changes, leading to disappointment and suffering when whatever they cling to inevitably vanishes. Emperor Asoka, prior to his awakening, was an ambitious and warlike king. Due to ignorance, he did not understand that power and dominance do not bring genuine happiness. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha said, "Ignorance is a deep darkness from which all forms of suffering arise." He emphasized that it is precisely because of ignorance that sentient beings cannot escape samsara. 2. Mental formations. Mental formations, also translated as volitional activities or formations, are actions produced by will, including both intentional and unintentional activities. They encompass thoughts, speech, and deeds stemming from ignorance, and these actions create karma. Karma is the decisive foundation for rebirth and is a direct cause of suffering in future lives. In Buddhism, mental formations are understood as habitual tendencies or impulses in the mind that prompt one to act in certain ways. Influenced by ignorance, these formations often lead sentient beings into unwholesome actions, generating negative karma and subsequent suffering. However, mental formations can also be wholesome if they arise from correct understanding. Example: because of ignorance, a person might always act selfishly, harming others to achieve personal goals. Such actions produce negative karma, causing them to suffer in future lifetimes. In the story of the monk Devadatta, who tried to harm the Buddha for power, the unwholesome karma he created led him to fall into hell after death. In the Sayutta Nikaya, the Buddha said, "Mental formations are the root of karma. They arise from ignorance, and karma is created by these unwholesome actions. 3. Consciousness. Consciousness refers to the awareness or cognitive process that perceives the external world. When the karma of previous lives remains unsettled, consciousness is carried over to a new life, laying the foundation for the formation of a new being. Consciousness begins when a new sentient life is formed, bringing with it tendencies and karmic energy from past lives. It is the crucial factor linking the past with the present in the process of rebirth. When consciousness enters a womb, it combines with name and form, mental and physical components, thereby creating a new individual. Example: when a person dies, consciousness does not disappear but continues to exist as karmic energy. In the Buddha's own accounts of his past lives, he often recalled his previous existences. This demonstrates that his consciousness persisted across many lifetimes. In the Sayutta Nikaya, the Buddha taught, "Consciousness is an unbroken stream from one life to the next. It is the bridge that connects past, present, and future." 4. Name and form. Name and form is the combination of name, mentality, and form, physicality, creating a living entity. Name includes non-material factors such as feelings, perceptions, volition, and consciousness, while form consists of material factors such as the physical body and the 5 sense faculties. Name and form is the harmonious coordination of mind and body, enabling sentient beings to perceive and interact with the world. Name and form arises from consciousness and grows stronger over time. Without this combination, life would not exist. Example: when a baby is born, it has both a physical body, form, and a mind, name. Through name and form, the child is able to feel, think, and develop responses to the surrounding environment. The Buddha stated in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, "Name and form are like two sides of a coin. They cannot be separated. Name cannot exist without form, and form cannot function without name." 5. The 6 sense bases. The 6 sense bases are the 6 sense faculties: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. These are the means by which sentient beings come into contact with the external world. Once name and form is established, the sense faculties develop, allowing sentient beings to experience and interact with their environment. The 6 sense bases serve as the bridge between the internal and external realms, enabling beings to gather information from the surroundings and respond to it. Each sense corresponds to a particular object: form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental objects. And through these processes, beings begin to differentiate, perceive, and generate suffering. Example: a person uses their eyes to see, ears to hear, nose to smell, and mind to think. Whenever a sense faculty engages with its object, discrimination and perception arise, leading to craving and desire. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha taught, "The 6 sense bases are the doors that lead beings into the whirlpool of craving and suffering. Where there is contact, suffering arises." 6. Contact. Contact is the moment when the sense faculties come into contact with external objects, allowing us to recognize the world. As the 6 sense faculties engage with external phenomena, form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mental objects, feeling, vedana, arises. Contact is the linking process between the senses and their objects, forming the basis for the emergence of sensations. Contact plays an important role in shaping our experiences. When a sense faculty encounters an external object, it triggers mental cognition, leading to judgment or evaluation. Contact is the stepping stone to feeling, which in turn gives rise to craving and suffering. Example: when someone sees something beautiful, hears pleasant sounds, or feels a pleasurable touch, these experiences generate a sense of enjoyment. Conversely, If the contact is with something unpleasant, that person will feel discomfort or suffering. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha said, "Contact is the convergence of sense faculty and object, the starting point of feeling and suffering." 7. Feeling. Feeling is the sensation that arises from contact. As the sense faculties contact external objects, beings experience various sensations, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Feeling is the next step after contact in the process of perceiving and experiencing the world. There are 3 primary types of feeling: O pleasant, O unpleasant, O neutral. Depending on the type of feeling, beings will respond differently. When experiencing pleasure, they desire to keep it. When experiencing discomfort, they want to avoid it. This leads to craving tanha, the next link in the chain. Example: when someone eats delicious food, they experience a pleasant feeling and want more. Conversely, facing a painful experience, they feel unpleasant and seek to avoid it. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, feeling is the root of craving and suffering. Where there is feeling, there is clinging to the world. 8. Craving. Craving is the thirst or desire that arises from feeling. When experiencing pleasant feelings, beings long to maintain them. When encountering unpleasant feelings, they wish to avoid them. Craving is the grasping and ceaseless wanting of sensations and is the root cause of all suffering in life. There are 3 main types of craving. O craving for sense pleasures. O craving for existence. O craving for non-existence. Craving is the direct cause leading to actions that produce karma, thereby perpetuating the cycle of rebirth. Example: a wealthy individual might constantly crave more possessions, even though they already have plenty craving for sense pleasures. As they grow older, they might yearn to be young again or to live forever, craving for existence. Confronted with intense suffering, they might wish not to exist at all, craving for non-existence. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha said, "Craving is the chain that binds beings to the cycle of birth and death. Where there is craving, suffering never ends." 9. Clinging. Clinging is the action of holding on to craving. When craving is unchecked, it leads to clinging, the act of grasping, possessing, or tightly holding on to what one desires. Clinging is where beings do not simply desire but actively strive to keep what they crave. Clinging engenders the formation of strong karma because people will do everything in their power, even unwholesome acts, to obtain what they want. Once clinging arises, it strengthens actions in the present life and sets the stage for future rebirth. Example: someone might become fixated on the idea that they must have power, then do whatever it takes, including wrongdoing, to achieve it. This creates negative karma, causing them to face suffering in the next life. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha taught, clinging is another link in the chain that binds beings to birth and death. As long as you cling, you cannot break free from suffering. 10. Becoming. Becoming, or existence, is the fruition and establishment of a new life. Becoming results from clinging. When beings hold tightly to craving and clinging, they generate karma that leads to rebirth. Becoming is the phase during which beings prepare for the arising of a new life shaped by the karma they have created. In this state of becoming, beings carry all the karma created in past lives, which determines the form and circumstances of their future existence. Becoming is the foundation for the emergence of a new life and perpetuates the cycle of samsara. Example: someone who lives a life filled with strong cravings and attachments creates the karmic conditions that lead them into a new life. Becoming is the transitional state that prepares them to be reborn with the accumulated karma from their previous actions. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha said, "Becoming is the continuation of karmic force. As long as karma remains, beings will continue in the cycle of birth and death." 11. Birth. Birth is the emergence of a new life, the direct result of becoming. When the conditions of karma have been fulfilled, beings are reborn into a new existence. Birth marks the beginning of another cycle of suffering in samsara. With the birth of a new being, all the suffering inherent in life, such as aging, sickness, and death, will once again unfold. Birth is the starting point of new suffering, and unless the 12 links are broken, beings remain confined within the cycle of samsara. Example: when a child is born, it inherits not only the physical form but also the karma from past lives. This karma shapes its life in the new existence. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, birth is the beginning of suffering. To be born is to endure aging, sickness, and death. 12. Aging and death. Aging and death is the final stage of one life, marking the end of a life cycle. However, death does not signify a definitive end, because if karmic forces remain, another cycle of rebirth begins anew. Aging and death is the inevitable result of birth. As beings grow old and die, they endure all forms of suffering associated with the body's and mind's deterioration. It is a vivid testament to the impermanence of life. Example: when a person grows old, they face challenges in both health and spirit. Death inevitably draws near, and if karmic forces persist, they will be reborn into a new life. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha said, "Aging and death mark the conclusion of one life, but also herald the beginning of another cycle of samsara. As long as there is clinging to life, aging and death never cease." The 12 links of dependent origination is a complex chain of cause and effect, illustrating how suffering arises and persists in the cycle of samsara. Each factor interconnects with the others, and beings continue to be reborn and suffer unless they can break the chain. Breaking the cycle of samsara through the 12 links. To escape suffering and the cycle of birth and death, the Buddha taught that one must break the 12 links of dependent origination. Disrupting one or more factors in this chain halts the cycle of samsara, leading to liberation from birth and death. The process of breaking the 12 links begins with eliminating ignorance, which is the root of all suffering and the origin of rebirth. First, between ignorance and wisdom. As mentioned, ignorance is the failure to perceive the true nature of life, particularly the 3 characteristics of existence: impermanence, suffering, and non-self. Thus, to break the cycle of samsara, we must replace ignorance with wisdom. This wisdom is not mere worldly knowledge, but deep insight into the nature of reality, clearly seeing impermanence in the constant flux of all phenomena. When wisdom is present, beings no longer cling to impermanent objects, thereby avoiding craving and clinging. The Buddha taught that practicing the Noble Eightfold Path is the most effective way to cultivate wisdom and eliminate ignorance. The Eightfold Path includes 1. Right view. Correct understanding of the 4 noble truths in the 12 links of dependent origination. 2. Right intention. Wholesome thinking, free from greed, hatred, and delusion. 3. Right speech. Truthful and honest speech, avoiding deceit. 4. Right action. Ethical conduct, refraining from harm. 5. Right livelihood. Earning a living in a righteous way, not through occupations that harm sentient life. 6. Right effort. Diligent effort in moral cultivation without abandoning practice. 7. Right mindfulness. Clear awareness of one's actions and thoughts. 8. Right concentration. Meditative concentration leading to mental clarity and peace. 2nd, between mental formations and right action. If ignorance is dispelled, mental formations, the actions that create karma, no longer stem from unwholesome motives such as greed, hatred, and delusion. When we act with mindfulness and wisdom, negative karma ceases to be generated, leading to the cessation of suffering. Example: in daily life, when we act with compassion and understanding, we not only create good karma, but also avoid unwholesome acts that bring future suffering. Next, between consciousness and liberation from samsara, when mental formations stop, consciousness, the awareness and continuity of a new being, no longer undergoes rebirth. This means that without new karma driving it, the cycle of rebirth ends, resulting in liberation from samsara. In many Buddhist scriptures, such as the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Buddha described enlightenment and liberation as the cessation of consciousness, wherein one is freed from the cycle of birth and death, and no longer subject to rebirth. Then, between name and form and the six sense spaces recognizing impermanence, when consciousness ceases, name and form, the union of mind and body, also fails to materialize. Without name and form, the six sense spaces cannot arise. Thus, there is no contact with the external world through the senses, liberating one from all painful sensations and desires. With developed wisdom, one clearly sees the impermanent nature of both name and form, letting go of attachment to the physical world and to sense experiences. Consequently, one no longer feels bound by the suffering arising from name and form. Continuing, between contact and feeling, and the role of mindfulness and letting go. Contact and feeling are critical to engaging with the outside world and generating sensations. When a sense faculty meets its object, feeling pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral arises. However, if one is mindful, they recognize the impermanent nature of all sensations and do not become entangled in craving. Mindfulness helps us observe sensations objectively, neither clinging to pleasant ones nor repelling unpleasant ones. If beings stop reacting blindly to these feelings, craving and clinging, which create karmic force, do not arise. Moving on. Between craving, clinging, and becoming, and the cessation of desire and rebirth, craving and clinging are the strongest links in producing karma and sustaining samsara. When craving arises, beings strive to possess whatever they desire, leading to clinging. From this, karma is generated, propelling them into further becoming. However, if craving and clinging are absent, rebirth itself ceases. To achieve this, one must practice renunciation, refraining from attaching to any objects, whether material or mental. Complete letting go prevents the cycle of birth and death from continuing. Finally, between birth and aging, death, and ultimate liberation, when becoming ceases, birth, the creation of a new life, does not occur. This implies that beings no longer experience the suffering inherent in birth, aging, sickness, and death. If birth does not arise, the process of aging and death also ends. This state is Nirvana, the final release from suffering and rebirth. In Nirvana, beings are no longer bound by karma or the cycle of birth and death, and they are free from the suffering caused by ignorance, craving, and karmic retribution. The 12 links of dependent origination is not only a causal mechanism for explaining the arising and perpetuation of suffering, it is also a map leading sentient beings out of the cycle of samsara. By understanding and practicing according to the Buddha's teachings, we can break this chain of dependent origination and thereby attain liberation and ultimate happiness. Breaking the 12 links begins with developing wisdom to dispel ignorance and continues with mindful practice to relinquish craving. Once a deep understanding of the impermanent nature of all phenomena is realized and attachment to the material world is abandoned, one attains nirvana, permanently ending the cycle of birth and death and all suffering. Nirvana, the ultimate liberation. Nirvana is the highest goal in Buddhism, where beings completely transcend the cycle of rebirth and all suffering. When one fully understands and practices the 12 links, They eliminate the causes of suffering and karma, thereby attaining nirvana. In nirvana, all desires, cravings, anger, and ignorance are extinguished. It is not a physical place, but a mental state where all suffering is overcome, and inner peace is permanently sustained. Nirvana is generally described in two main stages. 1. Nirvana with remainder. This is the state of nirvana attained while still living in a physical body. Those who reach nirvana but continue to live like the arahants no longer experience suffering driven by greed, hatred, or delusion, though they remain in the world to guide other beings. Although they still possess a physical form, they no longer cling to it, having completely exhausted their karma. Example: after the Buddha's enlightenment, he lived for another 45 years to teach and guide sentient beings. Though he still inhabited a physical body, he was free from worldly attachments and dwelled in the state of nirvana. 2. Nirvana without remainder. Nirvana without remainder is the complete and final liberation, arising after the death of one who has attained enlightenment and thus will never be reborn. In this state, there is no physical body or mind to attach to anything, and the individual is utterly free from samsara. Example: when the Buddha entered final nirvana, parinirvana, he left the physical world entirely, no longer subject to birth, death, or rebirth. This is the state of nirvana without remainder, in which there is no continued existence in any form. The 12 links and the interaction of mind and body. The 12 links of dependent origination is not just a linear process. It also reflects the complex interaction between mind and body. Understanding how mind and body interrelate is essential to grasping the essence of suffering and the path to liberation. Mind and body in samsara. Mind. In Buddhism, mind refers to consciousness, thought, and emotion. It includes elements such as thinking, feeling, and intention. The mind is influenced by ignorance, craving, and karma, and motivates our actions, mental formations. Body. The body is the material form through which beings interact with the world via the 6 sense bases. It is where feelings arise when the senses contact their respective objects. The interplay between mind and body generates feelings and intentions, which lead to actions and their consequences, karma. Because of this intricate interaction, whenever the mind is dominated by ignorance, the body's actions perpetuate karma and continue the cycle of samsara. Breaking the interaction between mind and body. To break free from samsara, one must cease the interaction of mind and body by cultivating wisdom and mindfulness. When ignorance, craving, and desire no longer control the mind, negative actions stop, preventing the creation of further karma. A successful practitioner gains control over their mind, no longer allowing the senses to drag them into craving and ignorance. When one masters the mind, the cycle of birth and death no longer ensnares them, and they attain ultimate liberation. Applying the 12 links in daily life. Though the 12 links of dependent origination form a profound philosophical system, applying them to daily life can yield practical benefits. By understanding how suffering arises and is sustained, we can adjust our behavior and thinking to live more happily and with less distress. 1. Recognizing impermanence. One of the key applications of the 12 links is recognizing the impermanent nature of all phenomena. Everything in life, whether material objects, emotions, or relationships, is temporary and subject to change. Once we understand that nothing is permanent, we reduce our grasping for fleeting things and mitigate our suffering. Example: when faced with loss, if we realize that change is a natural part of life, we can accept it more easily and avoid excessive suffering when events do not align with our desires. 2. Practicing mindfulness. Mindfulness is crucial to breaking the chain of the 12 links. By living in the present moment and maintaining clear awareness of what is happening, we avoid the domination of ignorance and craving. Mindfulness helps us see the nature of all feelings and prevents us from being driven by craving and attachment. Example: while eating, if we practice mindfulness, we will recognize that the pleasant taste is impermanent and not cling to it. This awareness helps us control desire and live more freely. 3. Reducing craving and attachment. Understanding craving and clinging in the 12 links helps us see that suffering originates from desire and attachment to worldly phenomena. By lessening craving and attachment, we avoid generating negative karma and the painful consequences that arise later. Example: someone who is content with having enough, not always longing for more wealth or power, will feel at peace and avoid the stresses of relentless competition and strife. The 12 links of dependent origination is a core teaching in Buddhism, explaining in detail how suffering manifests and is perpetuated in the cycle of samsara. By comprehending each part of this causal chain, we can pinpoint the root causes of suffering and learn how to break it. The Buddha taught that only by eliminating ignorance and cultivating wisdom can one escape the cycle of rebirth and attain nirvana. Practicing mindfulness, relinquishing craving, and clearly recognizing the impermanence of all phenomena are essential steps on the path to liberation. These lessons in the 12 links are not limited to those seeking ultimate enlightenment. They can be integrated into our daily lives to lessen suffering and foster greater happiness and inner peace. The 12 links and their relationship to other Buddhist teachings. The 12 links of dependent origination do not exist in isolation. They are closely tied to other key Buddhist teachings such as the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, and the 3 characteristics of existence: impermanence, suffering, and non-self. Understanding this interconnectedness provides a holistic view of the path to liberation and how these doctrines reinforce each other in helping us end suffering. 1. The 12 links and the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths are the foundational truths the Buddha discovered and taught. 1. Suffering. 2. The cause of suffering arising from craving, ignorance, and attachment. 3. The cessation of suffering, which is nirvana. 4. The path to the cessation of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. The 12 links provide a detailed explanation of the second noble truth, showing how suffering arises step by step through ignorance and culminates in aging and death. By recognizing each factor in the chain, we understand and can address the roots of suffering, applying the Four Noble Truths to attain liberation. 2. The 12 links and the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path is the middle way leading to enlightenment and liberation from samsara. Each step of the path plays a pivotal role in severing the links of the 12 links of dependent origination. Example: O right view breaks ignorance, the root of the entire chain. O right intention guides us away from craving and clinging. O right mindfulness prevents us from becoming ensnared by sensations arising from contact and feeling. Each component of the Eightfold Path helps cut through one or more links in the chain, thereby dismantling samsara. 3. The 12 links and the 3 marks of existence. The 3 marks, or characteristics, of existence impermanence, suffering, and non-self form the core philosophical background of Buddhism. The 12 links reflect these 3 marks. O impermanence. Every link in the 12 links is subject to change and cessation, including life, feelings, and the body. Nothing lasts forever. O suffering. The entire chain from ignorance to aging and death is a repetitive cycle of suffering. Each link leads to some form of distress. O non-self. The 12 links demonstrate that there is no permanent self behind any phenomenon. Existence is merely a series of interdependent processes. When we understand non-self, we let go of the illusory I, freeing ourselves from attachment and suffering. The 12 links and different Buddhist schools. Throughout its history, Buddhism has explained and applied the 12 links of dependent origination in various ways, reflecting the perspectives of different schools and traditions. Below are some major schools. 1. Theravada Buddhism. In Theravada, the 12 links are understood through basic causal principles. Each link arises due to the preceding one, forming a direct chain of cause and effect. Liberation is contingent upon personal insight and practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. In the Dhammapada and other Pali texts, the 12 links are often used to demonstrate the causes and consequences of suffering and how to end it through moral conduct, meditation, and wisdom. 2. Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana deepens the interpretation of the 12 links by relating them to the concept of emptiness, shunyata. Mahayana teaches that all links in the chain lack inherent existence. They appear and disappear based on conditions. Thus, practitioners must not only perceive impermanence, but also recognize the empty nature of all phenomena. Mahayana also emphasizes universal salvation, which seeks to save all sentient beings from samsara. Bodhisattvas use their insight into the 12 links to lead others toward ending the cycle of birth and death, even when they themselves have attained personal awakening. 3. Vajrayana Buddhism. Vajrayana or Tantric Buddhism regards the 12 links as part of one's spiritual practice to transform suffering into an opportunity for swift enlightenment. Vajrayana practitioners emphasize that every phenomenon and experience, including the 12 links, can be transformed when one perceives their true nature. Vajrayana masters teach that once we realize the empty and impermanent nature of the 12 links, we can transform birth and death into a means of rapidly progressing toward enlightenment. The 12 links and the journey to enlightenment. Ultimately, the 12 links of dependent origination is a map guiding us from ignorance to awakening, from suffering to liberation. It is not just theoretical, it is a practical tool that allows sentient beings to perceive the nature of existence and suffering, thereby finding the path to freedom. Through practicing mindfulness, meditation, and wisdom, practitioners can begin to dismantle the cycle of samsara laid out in the 12 links. Each link represents an aspect of suffering, but also an opportunity to recognize and end it. Upon attaining enlightenment, one realizes that all phenomena in the world are merely interdependent processes. Nothing exists independently or permanently. With such realization, one relinquishes attachment and craving, thereby attaining nirvana, a state in which suffering ceases forever and inner peace prevails eternally. The 12 links of dependent origination is a profound Buddhist teaching explaining the origin of suffering and the cycle of samsara. Through clear understanding of these links and the cultivation of wisdom, sentient beings can transcend the control of birth and death and reach complete liberation. By breaking this chain, suffering ends, and one arrives at nirvana, the supreme state of peace and freedom in Buddhism.